Hi, I'm Laura Cox Kaplan. Welcome to She Said podcast. Here on this podcast, we talk about the building blocks and the micro habits that help us create real and lasting influence. What do I mean by that? Well, we're talking about the kind of influence that helps you achieve your goals and whatever it is in life that you want to accomplish. But perhaps most importantly, it's the type of influence that helps you create real impact and that enables you to truly thrive. Hey friend, welcome to She Said podcast. This is episode 286. And I am just back from a full 2 weeks away. We spent about 16 days actually on a spring break trip, a family spring break trip to Europe. And we had an absolutely amazing time. But the experience got me to thinking about how can we get more out of our travel experiences when we set aside the time to really recharge. How can we maximize that time? And how can we really lock in both core memories from the trip as well as the inspiration that can come when we travel to and explore and take time away from the day-to-day? Now, my family hit London, Paris, Rome, Florence, parts of Tuscany, and Venice. And it was something of a race through both time and history where we could dig into art history and religion and the overlap between the two. The visual aspects of all of this, and if you've been to Europe, I'm sure you probably have, but if you've experienced these areas, you know the color, the architecture, the way that things felt and smelled and even tasted. We did a couple of cooking classes as well, and the one that we did in Rome, we did a tour of a market where we picked fresh vegetables and met vendors, and then we went to a local small butcher shop to pick the chicken. We had a guide with us, and then the guide took us through the cooking process, and we made a traditional Italian meal, including gelato, which we made first, which was really fun, and we made homemade pasta. All of it was just amazing, and I highly recommend an experience like that because it's a great way to truly dive into a culture. But one of the things that I was reflecting on all of this, I found that the experiences for me were much more available and accessible because I was able to be more present and available. And the reason for that is that I had done a couple things that I don't often do. In fact, I think this is probably the first time. I actually fully paused the podcast for that 2-week period so that I could fully immerse myself in the trip and be more aware of what I'm experiencing. Normally in the past, I would create some encore episodes and then still be posting those both on social media and on the podcast platform while I'm gone. But this time I opted not to do that because I simply didn't want the distraction, and I wanted to be able to be more present for the experience and for my kids. And that freedom and that complete break, which I realize might not be possible for everyone, was incredibly helpful. And it did a couple things. It left me much more mentally refreshed than I might have been otherwise. And it gave me more brain space to really take in and experience what I was seeing and what we were learning about. And so I found that to be really, really helpful. Now, because taking photos is a big part of how I experience something new, you may be like that as well. It's also how I like to document my travels and what I'm seeing, and I'm pretty aggressive about the whole thing, much to my children's annoyance often. But I did something on this trip that I found really helpful and useful, and I wanted to share it with you in case this would be helpful to you. Because we were learning so much and we were exploring at such a rapid pace, my ability to process some of the detail behind what I was seeing was frankly limited. So every single day when we would head back to the hotel for a couple of hours before dinner, I would take out my phone, I would go through my photos, I would organize them into folders in my photo app. And while I'm doing that, I also made notes on things that really jumped out at me or things that I wanted to maybe look up and learn a bit more about, or just facts that I wanted to sort of reinforce so that I would remember them. And so I found that process of doing that every single day really helpful to reinforce what I was learning and what I was seeing, and also marrying all those pieces together. Really, really helpful. And the process of creating these separate folders on my phone also made it so much easier and so much less overwhelming at the end of my trip when I was ready to sort of go through all my pictures and maybe create some reels and some additional content for stories. It just made accessing those particular images so much easier. I would also try every day, as I had sorted through my photos and sort of reflected on what I had learned, would be to try to create a short reel or maybe a social post that I could share with my followers. And that did a couple things. I mean, A, it allowed me to share what we were experiencing, which was really fun, but it also initiated feedback from my followers for sites and locations and experiences that they had had in these areas that they didn't want me to miss. And so I could add those tips and suggestions to my list and also potentially incorporate those suggestions into our trip, which I found super helpful. In those reels that I included on Instagram, I also included some of my personal tips there. So if you happen to be planning a trip to any of those places that we hit, I've included a few things that I would recommend that you might want to add to your itinerary. So be sure to check out those reels and specifically the descriptions that I've included with them, because there's some helpful stuff that you might find useful there. I will be sharing a few more of those over the next few days, so make sure that you're following me on Instagram so you won't miss those. Now, another tip related to photos, and one thing that I find really helpful, is to create an establishing shot of wherever you are, maybe some specific landmark or a street name or an address or the signage at a restaurant, as the case may be. By doing that, it can help you to physically orient the images that will then follow. And that can make organizing all of that at the end of the day really, really much easier. Another tip is to make sure that you also capture a broad array of images, not just buildings and your family, but also close-up shots of details, things that you're noticing, that you're really absorbing, things that are speaking to you potentially, colors, architectural elements, the cobblestone streets, perhaps. I sort of became obsessed with things like that and the little architectural elements, but capturing those in your photos as well, the spaces, the colors, the architecture, everything that's inspiring you. When I do this, it literally helps me bring the experience back to life in my mind when I go back and look at those images. And this is especially true when I've captured just a broad array of different kinds of shots. Now, often I'll also see something when I'm looking at the pictures that I might have originally missed, some element maybe, even though I was maybe inspired to take the photo in the first place, but there might be another element that I find in the photo when I go back and look at it. Those more detailed close-up images tend to be the ones that have really captured both my attention and my imagination, and I love having those to look back on after the fact. Now, of course, a photo is not the same thing as experiencing something in real life, but your photos can help you really reinforce your memories of what you've already seen in order to help you make even more lasting memories, to really help solidify those as core memories, if you will. By making some time to sort through photos each day, for me, it made the entire process of then going back through everything much less overwhelming than if I had waited until the end of the trip to go back through all my photos, because let's face it, there were probably several thousand. One other thing that I did while we were visiting sites is I made notes in my phone in a Google Notes app where I was also capturing maybe comments that people had left about things not to miss while we were in a particular place. I did post regularly on my stories, not extensively, but I did try to post every day so that it would sort of document where we were, and people would react to that and say, oh, hey, don't miss such and such when you're in Siena, or make sure you go to see the Borghese, such and such at the Borghese Museum, or whatever it happened to be. And I would make a note of those comments and that feedback in that Notes app so that I could either share it with you or make sure that we captured it for later. This was a really easy way of staying a bit more organized, and it worked really well for me. I would love to hear any additional tips that you may have for organizing and keeping track of your photos and ways that you work to retain what you've learned on a trip like this. I think it can be really, really helpful, especially as you want to go back and really make these memories last. Now, the other tip that I wanted to share relates to one way that you can maximize and really stretch out the positive vibes that hopefully you experienced during your trip. It's a tip that I think can also help with re-entry and going back to work and life after vacation. And let's face it, getting back to work and life after taking time off can be tough. That was certainly true for me. I always experience such a mix of emotions, including just the angst of where to begin when you come home. Mail is piled up, emails piled up, laundry's piled up, kids are tired, you're out of groceries potentially, you got to unpack your suitcase. So it all tends to be both a project management challenge and also potentially an emotional one. You are ready to be home, but you also loved the time that you spent away, and the fact that it's over is frankly kind of sad. For me, because my kids are now teenagers, I find myself thinking about the fact that trips like the one that we just took will be fewer. Eventually, my kids will have jobs, God willing, and they will probably have significant others at some point in the future. And so trips like this will certainly be different, if not less frequent. So, that makes me kind of sad when I think about that. So I'm really trying to soak up every minute with my kids and then really reflect on how grateful that I am for that special time. I think that remembering to feel grateful and to really experience that is super important. But I also try to allow myself to feel a little bit of melancholy when I get home, at least briefly, as I'm sort of easing back into things. I did find myself, as I tried to get back to work on Tuesday morning, to be almost impossible. My schedule was upside down. I had way too many things on my list, and I was tired after a 9+ hour trip home the previous day. So the obvious advice about being kind and gentle with myself in these instances, of course, applies here. But I actually found something else that I thought was helpful and that I thought you might appreciate as well, and I want to share. It's to create a travel joy list. And I think it's a great idea to do this when you're maybe on the plane on the way home from wherever you've been. That's actually where I ran across this idea, or a version of it. Now, more typically, a joy list is a personal inventory of activities and experiences and just things that bring you joy and happiness. And it is a way of consciously focusing your mind on the positive aspects of your life, the things that are important to you, and it can help you create a sense of gratitude and appreciation. So on the plane ride on our way home, I ran across this idea of the joy list, and I thought about how powerful this might be in the context of capturing those joyful memories and images and experiences that I wanted to make sure and solidify in my memory. So I took out my phone and my notebook, and I scrolled through my pictures, my organized photos, and I made a joy list based on those images, and then I added some of the other memories that I didn't capture visually. Maybe something hilarious that only my family would appreciate that happened on the trip, or some way in which we connected during the trip, like our cooking classes and something funny or interesting that happened then. maybe the way that I felt during a particular moment of seeing the Duomo in Siena, or Michelangelo's masterpiece in the Sistine Chapel, or maybe the queasy feeling that I felt in my stomach when we rode up to the top of the Eiffel Tower, or seeing Venice for the first time and experiencing it on a gondola, which was just glorious. Seeing these sights and sounds through the eyes of my children, which was amazing. The conversations that we had about what we were seeing. I tried to make a list of all of these things in order to really solidify those memories in my mind. Now, in a more typical context, a joy list can have several benefits. Most importantly, it can serve as a reminder to intentionally seek out and engage in activities that bring you joy, ultimately leading to a more fulfilling and satisfied life. But a travel joy list can be a list of those experiences, the sights, the colors, the buildings, the paintings, or all of the above that moved you while on your trip. Images that spoke to you or sparked your creativity, especially those detailed ones that I talked about earlier. Things that you learned that shifted or changed your perspective. Those precious moments, perhaps, over a meal with your loved ones during the trip. One great thing about a travel joy list is that it can be a really nice and a very personal souvenir, and one that will help you further memorialize all the highlights of your travel experience. It can also be a great tool to spark joy and creativity even long after the trip as you go back and reflect on all that travel magic. I really loved looking back at the travel joy list that I made, and I found doing so really helped me boost my gratitude as I was beginning to ease back into work and sort of dealing with those melancholy feelings. Plus, it gave me something fun to share with you today. Friend, I'd love to know if you've ever created a joy list, or if you've ever created maybe a travel joy list, or if you plan to do so. I'd love to hear how that goes, and any other tips that you have for really solidifying your memories and those creative influences that you get when you travel. I'd love to hear any tips that you have. Next week, we will pick up right where we left off with our collaboration series with the Southern Sea. I am so excited to get that restarted. If you have missed any of those conversations here this year in our third year of this series, my guests have been incredible women entrepreneurs who have shared great insights about branding and community and collaboration and career pivots and so much more. You will find the entire lineup wherever you listen to podcasts, but I have also organized a playlist on Spotify that you can find in the show notes for this episode 286. It contains the Southern Sea content from our past 3 years of collaboration conversations. So it's a great one-stop shop place where you can get all of those conversations in one place. So if you missed any of those, check that out. It is a true jewel box of insights. For now though, friend, thanks so much for making this little investment of time in yourself, and I'll talk to you again next week. And remember, She Said podcast is a weekly production of my media company, She Said Media.